Have you ever dreamed of living and working in the European Union? Only to find that for a non-EU citizen, the path looks like this completely impossible maze? Well, today we're going to untangle one of those paths, step by confusing step. So, what's the goal here? For so many digital nomads and entrepreneurs, it's pretty simple. Get access to the EU market, have that freedom of movement, and, ideally, a friendly tax situation. And yeah, with a flat tax rate of just 10%, Bulgaria is a very attractive option. But wanting it is one thing, actually getting it is where the real work begins. And that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's one thing to want to live in the EU, but it's a whole other thing to find a path that's practical, legal, and actually achievable. We can forget the theory for a minute. What we need is a road-tested map. In that map, well, it comes from the real-world experience of a Canadian and Montenegrin couple who went through this exact process. We're going to follow their story, their setbacks, their wins, and see how this whole thing is really done.
Okay, first things first, the where and the how. The country they chose was Bulgaria, and the specific legal key they used to unlock the door was something called a Trade Representative Office, or TRO for short.
So what on earth is a TRO? Well, think of it like this. You have a company that already exists outside the EU. You then register an official representative office for that company inside Bulgaria. Now, this office doesn't need to be a huge operation. It doesn't need to hire a bunch of people. Its main job for our purposes is to name you as its official trade representative. And that's the title that makes you eligible for a residence permit.
But, and this is a big but, here is the first major hurdle you have to clear. This isn't some loophole for a brand new startup. The parent company, the one outside the EU, has to have a proven track record. It must have been active for at least 2 years. This is a non-negotiable gatekeeper for the entire process.
So let's say your company is eligible. Great. Now the real fun begins, the mountain of paperwork. And this is where being super organized and paying attention to every little detail is, well, it's everything.
So what's in this giant stack of paper? It helps to think of it in 3 parts. First, you've got your corporate documents, all official, apostilled, and translated. Second, there's your personal file. You know, things like a clean criminal record check. And finally, you need to prove you can actually live in Bulgaria. Health insurance, a bank statement showing you've got enough funds, and that incredibly important rental contract.
And this right here, this is where one tiny detail can become a huge roadblock. See, it's not enough to just sign a lease. You need a separate, notarized declaration from your landlord saying, yes, you can live there. And as this couple found out, convincing a landlord to make an extra trip to a notary for this one piece of paper can be a surprisingly tough and common problem.
Okay, you've got your TRO registered, your paperwork is all in order. You might be thinking you're in the clear, right? Nope. Now you actually have to leave the country to face the next boss level, getting the type D visa.
And listen, this is a non-negotiable bright red line rule. You have to apply for this long-stay visa from a Bulgarian embassy or consulate in your home country or where you have permanent residency. You cannot, under any circumstances, be physically in Bulgaria when you do it, and that means you've got to plan for travel, time, and money spent outside the country you're trying to move to.
This is so important because this is where you have to manage your expectations. You'll see it all over the internet and maybe even hear from officials that the process takes up to 30 days. But in the real world, 30 days isn't the finish line. It's more like the starting pistol. You should be prepared to wait at least that long.
For this couple, the actual wait time was 35 days. Now, 5 extra days might not sound like a lot, but when you're in limbo, living out of a suitcase and waiting for your passport back, every single day counts. Seriously, plan for 30-plus days.
Visa in hand, it's finally time to fly back to Bulgaria for the final stretch. This is it. This is where all that preparation comes together for the residence permit application itself.
Here is a piece of advice straight from the people who did this that could save you a world of pain. Unless you are fluent in Bulgarian, do not go to the migration office by yourself. The staff there rarely speak English, and having a local professional with you to navigate the bureaucracy, translate questions, and just make sure your file is submitted correctly, it is worth every single penny. The process here is pretty straightforward. You'll submit that same stack of documents all over again. You pay a tiny application fee, it's about 10 Bulgarian lev. Then, once you get the good news that you've been approved, you'll pay the main permit fee, which is around 500 to 600 lev per person. After that, there's just one final wait.
And that final wait is just for the physical residency card to be printed. The standard time is about 14 days. But if you're in a rush, you can pay a bit extra to get it expedited, and you'll have it in your hands in just 3 days. All right, we've covered the time, we've covered the stress, but what about the money? Let's break down the total budget for this entire process based on what this couple actually spent.
So let's look at this financial breakdown. The biggest single expense, by far, is for the legal help and the TRO setup itself. That's going to be around 2,500 euros. After that, you're looking at about 550 euros for all the corporate documents and apostilles, another 100 for translations, and then finally about 650 euros for all the various government and card fees for 2 people.
Which brings the grand total for 2 people to approximately 3,700 euros. Now, if you're applying solo, the estimate is probably closer to about 2,000 to 2,500 euros. Either way, it's a pretty significant investment that you need to budget for from day one. So, after following this entire journey, what are the most important things to take away from all this? If you're actually thinking about this path, what do you absolutely, positively need to remember? Here it is, your 3-point survival guide. First, watch those expiry dates like a hawk. A lot of these official documents are only good for 3 to 6 months, so your timing is crucial. Second, plan for delays. Just assume the Type D visa process is going to take longer than 30 days. And third, budget for everything. Make sure your financial plan covers every single cost, from the big legal fees all the way down to the small translation charges.
So we've laid out the path, the costs, and the potential pitfalls. It's a complex, demanding, and pretty expensive process, no doubt about it. But for the right person, it leads to that goal, a low-tax life in the European Union. Now that you have the map, the only question left is this a journey you're prepared to take?